Hi, I'm Zach Needles, editor-in-chief of Family Business Magazine. In this interview, Suzanne Sengelmann discusses unexpectedly becoming CEO of Lundberg Family Farms after serving as the company's chief growth officer. Hi, Suzanne. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good morning. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to chat with you. And before we get into your work at Lundberg, let's talk a little bit about your career path before joining Lundberg Family Farms, if you don't mind telling me a little bit about that.
Not at all. So mostly I'm a CPG brand builder, but I did start my career 100 years ago I was a finance major from school. So
Okay.
I did finance for 3 years. And the only reason I start with that is I just feel like that background is so beneficial. I tell my boys that all the time. I'm like, you have to understand, profitability and margin and that type of thing if you're actually going to be successful in business.
Yeah.
But right after that, I moved into brand building at Clorox and worked on just about every brand in the company and Kingsford Charcoal, Hidden Valley, and Glad, all of that,
Yeah.
retail water filtration. After I left Clorox, I became chief marketing officer at Angie's Boom Chicka Pop. The ready to eat popcorn.
Yeah.
Met Dan and Angie Bastian, who are the best people I've ever met in my entire life. Beautiful founders, really lived, the mission and purpose of better for you food and creating a culture, internally that also represented the mission, which was
Right.
kind of the first time that I had a chance to experience what I'm almost calling like a 360 mission,
Yeah.
internal, external, everything was the same. So fell in love, with just that whole proposition. Then, I did a couple startups. COVID hit, and mayhem in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But in about 2022, a good friend of mine from Clorox, Craig Stevenson, had accepted the position at Lundberg Family Farms. Lundberg had made the choice at that point, obviously they're family owned and have been since 1937, but made the choice that they wanted to bring in an external CEO for the first time
Yeah.
ever. And
Yeah.
they wanted someone with consumer products background. So Craig and I knew each other from Clorox. I know his wife incredibly well. So he brought me in just to do a strategy project. Yeah, and the first time I had never seen the rice fields, never seen that, seen that part of California, Richfield, Chico, et cetera. So when I drove up to kind of start leading the strategy process and I just saw the rice and the birds and the wildlife, just the beauty. It was just a time in my life when I just said, I want to do something that I can see, feel, and that I just like believe is important. So, so,
Excellent.
so then I joined as chief growth officer, and about a month ago, they made me CEO.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Craig was actually on the podcast toward the end of last year, and he talked a little bit about what drew him to the business. And I know obviously you're succeeding Craig now. How did that come about that you
Yeah,
became a CEO?
yeah. Well, a lot of luck, I would say. But first and foremost, Craig obviously was my partner in crime from a strategy standpoint, and we're really proud that we led, the growth of the portfolio and the elevation to regenerative, organic, et cetera. He had been in position for 4 years. I'm not sure when he first took the position. They had just bought a place in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Stunning.
Yeah,
And I don't know that they had either he or his wife had realized that that was going to become pretty much a home base. I mean, she's
yeah,
a designer and did just a beautiful job. And so I don't know if you've ever tried to get from Sacramento to Santa Fe, but it's about 9 hours. So he obviously he had a place in St. Helena as well. Long story. Long is that he really wanted to. He was at a time of his life where he wanted to spend more time with his wife, so he
yeah,
took a position at a PE based company that allows him to be remote. And so
yeah.
I called his wife. I'm like, "Are you sure you want this man like 24 hours a day?" Uh, he said, I'm not sure, but the decision was made. So yeah, so he announced he was leaving, I think to much of the shock of all of us.
Yeah.
And then I was honored. I mean, in some ways it was kind of a natural progression, but in some ways not. So I was just honored to have an opportunity to take over.
Well, it's a really textbook example of why succession planning and having someone
Yeah.
who's ready to step in
Yeah.
at a moment's notice is so important, and that's what we talk about obviously so much on this podcast and in our magazine. So it's a great story from that perspective. And I wanted to you talked a little bit about your past experience. How has your experience both outside the company before joining and then what you did inside Lundberg before becoming CEO? How do you think that's going to inform your new role?
Yeah. So, that's a great question. So, first of all, I did brand building in a very large CPG with what I thought at the time was such constrained resources, but oh my lord, right? The resources we had. But I learned the foundational principles, right, and how to approach it.
Yeah.
Then when I was at Angie's, it was PE backed. So I
Yeah.
learned, first of all, navigating founders, not navigating, embracing, and how do you leverage them while navigating? Now that's the
Yeah.
word. A PE board, right?
Yeah.
I'd say, and I learned the importance of so Clorox. They like to say I really learned the importance of a P&L, profit and loss and gross
Yeah.
margin, et cetera. Then what I kind of skipped over is I actually was CEO of a startup about 2020 through 2022, right before I joined Lundberg for about 2.5 years. It was a product called Sensitive Home, and it was cleaning. I never thought I'd go back to cleaning, but for the cleaning products that actually were safe for people to use, not only the
Yeah.
planet, but us people. That I would say prepared me the absolute most because I learned the importance of cash flow.
Yeah.
I had to do cash flow on a daily or weekly basis, balance sheet. What don't get yourself caught with too much inventory. You need to make sure you have cash on hand, a cap table, right? The importance of various investors. And then I learned, pitching the business, et cetera. But I would say that experience in particular, I think really prepared me for this job. And I mean, some people would say I only had a team of 5 people. So they're kind of like, how hard was that? Oh, very hard, right? When you have a team of 5 people, right? And you have investors and, we had distribution at Wegmans, et cetera, and working
Yeah.
with a co-man. So basically I had my fingers in everything and I was
Yeah.
deep,
Yeah.
deep, deep. So I think that really prepared me. Obviously, it was a CEO position, but prepared me for, a CEO position of this size of company. And then, of course, the benefit to your point of succession and having led the growth part of the business. I just had such an understanding. I know where some of the bodies are buried. I actually buried some myself, right? So
Yeah.
you just have huge learning curve for me still on the farming
Mhm.
side and on the ops side. I wasn't as engaged, although I led innovation. And if you're going to lead innovation, you have to really understand how your operations work.
Yeah.
Um, but getting really down and dirty with the cash flow, with the balance sheet, with the profitability of the company has
Yeah.
been has been the biggest difference and step change. But I do feel really prepared for it.
Excellent. And you obviously have a very well-rounded background where you've done a lot of been involved in a lot of different types of companies and led a lot of different types of companies. What's it like to be the CEO of family business that has such a long history and so many your values are so important and the family owners are still very engaged?
Yes. It's obviously a big honor and it's challenging, right? I mean, first of all, I tell my friends this, it was kind of a small thing, but the organization is about 400 employees, and a lot of whom are manufacturing and farming, et cetera. And this might sound silly, but when they took my signature, and I had to like sign my name 3 times, I was like, what's this, going to be used for? You almost never use a pen anymore. And, HR said, well, this goes on everyone's paychecks. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I signed my name to, yeah, people's paychecks, a lot of whom I just was like, I'm feeling kind of responsible for people and their families, in the local Butte County, which is a big deal. So I was like, okay, you know, this is a big deal. So that's just part of, yeah, being a CEO in what I consider, like I said, a very small rural county where Lundberg since 1937 has played a huge role. So that was a big piece. But then to your point, the family, we have 43 shareholders. Um, Grandpa Albert had 4 boys, which you're probably aware. Each boy had their own branch of family. The good news is that there's so much common values, obviously, in terms of leaving the land better than you found it, and sustainability, and doing things the right way, high level of integrity. Having said that, there can sometimes be different approaches to, okay, therefore, what decision do you make that's truly consistent with that value?
Hmm.
And then each branch of the four boys, we have some that are on the East Coast and, MIT. They're all brilliant. So you have the East Coast MIT, and then you have the West Coast Stanford PhDs, and then you have those that still farm their land, and are brilliant at reading rice in Richville, California. So common values from the four brothers, and like I said, a common worldview, but it can be a little challenging. That's what I depend on my board of directors for, basically. Uh-huh, uh-huh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I think is such a great point, is the idea that yes, common values are important, but how you apply those values are not necessarily going to be uniform across
Nope,
everybody in the family or in the
nope.
business, and that's where those conversations have to happen. And that was going to be my next question. How do those values influence strategic decisions?
Well, the good news is, what I would say at a very high level, when I say, again, I mostly work with the board, who then, communicates with the owners. But when you say that you need to make a choice, like a significant capital investment, or, um, y- yeah, something that might put a little bit of a strain on the company, if you say, we need to do it from a food safety perspective, or we need to do it from an employee safety perspective, or it's done.
Yeah, yeah,
They don't necessarily really need to see the intricacies of the IRR or the NPV or anything. It's like, no, no. Um, Food safety and people safety are number one and above all else,
yeah,
above growing rice.
yeah,
So to not, I mean, yeah, there can be times when we don't have money in the budget for something, a couple $100,000 that needs to happen from, in let's say the mill for employee safety. It's done.
right,
So it's always nice to be able to count on something like that, and
yeah,
uh, we say too, our rice is pretty premium in the marketplace, and we're not getting filthy rich off of it, and that's because, um, we invest in doing things the right way, which oftentimes is the hard way, and there's no corners cut, which is an expensive way to do business, but it's a way that at this stage of my career, this is how I want to do business. So
yeah.
I'd say that's kind of some of the easier ones, but then to your point regarding a little bit of, let's call it, land strategy, something like that, there could be some differing opinions. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. But I love that. That's such a great illustration of how values are supposed to work, especially in a family business. It's like there are things that are so important to us that if we have to do them, if it costs money that we weren't expecting to spend, whatever it might be, we have to do it because it's core to what we believe in, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, and so I'll wrap up with a real easy bite-sized question, right? What do you envision for the future of the business?
Yeah. Oh, that's, yeah, really bite-sized and easy, right? Um, well, we're going into our next generation of strategic plan. So the plan that Craig and I built in fiscal year 22, I can't even believe it, but it's kind of
Yeah,
coming to, it was fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 28, and we're going to enter fiscal year 27 in September. So I was like,
yeah,
how did that happen? Because I'm
yeah,
still only 24 years old, and I'm, right? Like, how is this
yeah,
math? How's this math working? But we're about to, bite off the next generation of our strategy. The great news is from a growth perspective, we exceeded our objectives in terms of elevating to regenerative organic. I would say the speed at which we did that from a portfolio standpoint, we had thought it was going to take 4 to 5 years. It actually took 2 to 3.
yeah,
And then the results that we have seen behind the regenerative organic certification. Uh, I had some people very early on, none of whom worked for Lundberg, but when I said, no, we're going to elevate to regenerative organic, and we're going to do some packaging that better communicates that. And we had some external partners who I kept saying, well, build in, some velocity and distribution improvement for that. And they would say, well, Suzanne, we've never actually really seen velocity improvement for a packaging change.
yeah,
And like the third time they said that, I said, if you call our regenerative organic certification like elevation, a packaging change one more time, like, we're gonna fight, okay? No,
Right.
like, that's not what this is. And
Yeah.
so sure enough, I mean, we've seen velocity improvements of close to 15%. And distribution, key retailers such as Whole Foods and Thrive and Sprouts, and really, really leaning in, to that piece. So that piece of the strategy far exceeded our expectations. The other thing we did is we leaned into kind of different areas within the portfolio, really leaned into what we call ready to heat rice, which is our 90-second. We knew that that was a really emerging category. Some people are like, how hard is it to put rice in a rice cooker for 45 minutes? And others, like my son, when he is hungry, he has no idea he's hungry till 30 seconds before he's hungry. And then it's like, just get out of the way. So,
Right.
and then our minis, our little yummy little hexagon bite-sized minis, healthy snacking is obviously on fire. So we leaned into that part of the portfolio. So
Yeah.
very long answer to say the growth side has exceeded expectations. The biggest challenge, like I said, when you do things the right way and you do things the hard way, is ongoing profitability and ensuring that we can basically continue to grow margin over time so we can continue to invest and then continue to grow. And yeah, I mean, and that's a challenging strategic initiative for any ag company, I think,
Yeah.
particularly in today's environment, when you combine it with regenerative organic, um, and you combine it with the fact that we are fully integrated, which is again something that makes us special. Like, we grow our own seed, then we plant it, we harvest it, we dry and store it, we mill it, we pack it. I mean, we do everything. But so again, taking off, how do you really drive higher margins, greater profitability, so you can continue to reinvest in the business? It's quite a jigsaw puzzle that we're
Yeah.
trying to figure. Yeah, because everything is like this, right?
Right. Right.
If
You
you
move
move
one
one
piece and
piece,
then the other piece goes out.
there you
Yeah,
go. You
exactly.
got it. You can work at Lundberg. Yes, please.
Yeah.
So that's really going to be, how do we maintain growth? Because we've created exceptional momentum. We need it. The marketplace needs it. We're trying now to focus on what we like to call beyond the farm, which means how do we help elevate, others beyond the farm so that we can be having a greater impact beyond just what we farm. Oh, I forgot to say, within healthy snacking, we also have really identified the sweet space. So we
Yeah.
just came out with a line of sweet cakes with our birthday cake and our salted caramel. There's going to be more to come there because, again, healthy snacking. When I talked about the areas of growth within the portfolio, our minis healthy snacking is on fire, as it should be,
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
gluten free and they're non-GMO and they're everything. So we just invented a low sugar way to give yourself a little bit more permission to
Yeah.
have something in the afternoon or with wine while you're watching TV that yeah, it's just a little something something. So
Yeah.
more to come
Yeah.
on that.
Awesome. Well, I certainly appreciate those products. I love that because, yeah,
Good.
it's
Well, we'll
hard
have
to
to.
find, healthy snacks that
Right.
don't suck, right? So
Yeah, that you're not like, oh, I'm eating something healthy. No,
exactly.
my step niece she's gluten free, and when I
Yeah.
visited them, she had brought home all these gluten free muffins and cookies, and we're like, ugh. What?
Well,
And then so I just sent her a bunch of sweet cakes. I was like, these are naturally gluten free.
yeah,
You're not trying to replace it with something that makes it taste like cardboard.
exactly. Exactly.